The world knew her as a goddess of beauty and fame, but inside she was a broken girl searching for love. This is the heartbreaking true story behind Marilyn Monroe's iconic smile. A story that will not only touch your heart, but also transform your English. For more powerful stories that will help you master the language, subscribe now and turn on all notifications so you never miss our next chapter. Today, we are going to talk about a woman the world still remembers even now, almost 60 years after her death. She was a woman who had everything on the outside: incredible beauty, worldwide fame, and millions of fans who adored her. But on the inside, she carried a deep pain, a feeling of loneliness, and a heart that was quietly breaking day after day. This is not just the story of a Hollywood actress. This is the story of a small, forgotten girl named Norma Jean, who grew up to become the world's most famous woman, Marilyn Monroe. But behind her famous smile, behind her breathtaking beauty, was a life full of sadness, heartbreak, dark secrets, and silent tears. This is the story of how a little girl with no father and no real home and very little love became an icon of beauty, and died far too young, still searching for the one thing she always wanted: love. Let's start from the very beginning, the part of the story that people don't often talk about. Marilyn Monroe was not born Marilyn. That was a name that came later. Her real name, the name she was given as a baby, was Norma Jean Mortensen. She was born on the 1st of June, 1926, in the big city of Los Angeles, California. Her mother's name was Gladys Pearl Baker. Her father, well, she never knew him. On the birth certificate, her mother Gladys wrote down the name Edward Mortensen, but he was not Norma Jean's real father. The real man was someone else, a man named Charles Stanley Gifford. But he never accepted her. He never wanted to be her father. He left, he disappeared, and he never looked back. So from the very first day of her life, Norma Jean was rejected by the man who should have been there to protect her. Her mother Gladys worked as a film cutter in Hollywood. She worked with movies, but she had a terrible problem in her own mind. She was mentally ill. Sometimes Gladys was a loving mother. She would smile and talk with her little daughter. But other times, her illness took over. She would scream for no reason, cry for hours, or just stare at the wall, lost in a world no one else could see. She had a serious brain illness called paranoid schizophrenia. She often believed that people were trying to hurt her or take her daughter away. One night, something terrible happened. In a moment of deep confusion, she even tried to smother young Norma with a pillow. Imagine how scary that must have been for a small child. When Norma Jean was just 7 years old, her mother's illness became too much. She was taken to a hospital, a mental institution, and she never came back to live with her daughter again. That was the day Norma Jean's world completely broke. No father, now no mother. There was no love, and there was no home. She became a ward of the state, which means she was a child with no family under the care of the government. For the next few years, she lived like a piece of paper blowing in the wind. She had no place to call her own. She was moved from one foster home to another. 11 different homes in total. Can you imagine that? 11 different families? Sometimes she stayed with relatives who didn't really want her. Sometimes she stayed with complete strangers. And sometimes she lived in an orphanage, a big cold building that felt more like a prison than a home. She slept on cold beds. She wore old clothes that didn't fit. She often ate her meals alone. But there was something worse than the hunger or the cold. It was the fear. In one foster home, when she was still just a girl, she was sexually abused by a man living there. A terrible, dark secret. She tried to tell someone. She tried to ask for help. But no one believed her. so she stopped talking about it. She locked the pain deep inside. And that is when she started to build a fake smile. The kind of beautiful, bright smile the world would one day know so well. She said later in her life, "A smile is the best makeup a girl can wear." But that smile didn't start as makeup. It started as a mask, a way to hide the terrible pain she felt inside. When Norma Jean turned 16, something happened that changed her life again. The foster family she was living with had to move to another state, but they could not take her with them. This meant she would have to go back to the orphanage. She was terrified of going back there. To avoid it, she made a very adult decision. She married her neighbor's son, a 21-year-old man named James Doherty. She didn't marry for love. She married to survive. She married to have a home. At just 16 years old, she became a wife. She cooked, she cleaned, and she tried very hard to be a good housewife. But deep down in her heart, she knew this was not the life she was meant to live. Her dreams were bigger, much bigger. In 1944, her husband James joined the United States Navy and went to fight in the war. Norma Jean needed to work, so she got a job in a factory. She was making parachutes for the soldiers. It was hard work day after day. But one day, a photographer came to the factory. He was taking pictures of women working to support the war for a magazine. He saw Norma Jean. He saw something special in her face. He asked her to pose for a picture. She was nervous, but she did it. She smiled, she posed, and the camera fell in love with her. That first photo was printed, then another and another. Suddenly, people started asking, "Who is this girl?" That was the beginning of something huge. In 1946, she signed her first movie contract with a big studio. The people at the studio told her, "You need a better name. Norma Jean Mortensen is not a name for a star." So she chose a new name. She chose Marilyn, inspired by a Broadway star she admired. And the studio gave her the last name Monroe, which was her mother's maiden name. That was the day Norma Jean died, and Marilyn Monroe was born. But deep inside, behind the new name and the beautiful smile, she was still that scared little girl, still searching for love, for safety, for someone who would not leave her. Marilyn Monroe had her new name, but that was only the beginning of her journey. She was no longer Norma Jean, the girl who cleaned houses and cried in the dark. Now she had to become Marilyn, the woman the world wanted to look at, the woman they wanted to desire and dream about. But the world and Hollywood did not make it easy for her. When she signed her first contract with the movie studio 20th Century Fox in 1946, she was full of hope. She thought her life was finally starting. But the studio bosses said she wasn't ready for big roles. They told her she needed to change. They told her to take acting classes, to lose some weight, to dye her brown hair blonde, and even to fix her teeth. She did it all. Quietly, patiently, she did everything they asked. She worked harder than anyone. She would watch other famous actresses on the movie screen for hours, practicing every expression, every look in front of a mirror. She studied how to walk in a special way, how to talk in a soft voice, how to do everything to make people watch her. And slowly, very slowly, they did start to watch her. But she didn't get the big roles she dreamed of. Not yet. In the beginning, she played very small parts. She was the pretty girl in the background, the dumb blonde who said one or two funny lines, the beautiful decoration in a scene. In 1949, before she became a big star, she had no money. She was behind on her rent. She was hungry. She had no husband anymore, no family to call, no safety net to catch her if she fell. So she did something very bold. She posed for nude photographs for a calendar. She lay on a piece of red velvet with nothing on her body. She used a fake name and took the money, just $50, so she could eat and pay her rent. Later, when she became famous, people found out about these photos. The newspapers printed them. The media expected her to be ashamed to apologize. But Marilyn did not lie. She did not hide. She simply told the truth. She said, "I was hungry. What could I do?" And the world, they didn't judge her. They loved her even more for it. She became a symbol of courage, of honesty, and of a raw, real beauty. She didn't hide her difficult past. She turned it into her power. Her real rise to stardom came between 1950 and 1953. She appeared in important movies like The Asphalt Jungle and All About Eve. Then came the big ones, Niagara Gentlemen, Prefer Blondes, and How to Marry a Millionaire. In these films, Marilyn wasn't just a pretty face anymore. She was funny, she was charming, and she glowed on the screen. Audiences all around the world fell deeply in love with her. One scene in particular made her unforgettable. It was the scene where she sang, "Diamonds are a girl's best friend," wearing a bright pink dress surrounded by men in tuxedos. That performance became one of the most iconic and famous moments in all of film history. In 1954, Marilyn married again. This time, she married a true American legend, Joe DiMaggio, a famous baseball player. He was strong, he was quiet, and he was deeply in love with her. But their love story was full of trouble. Joe didn't like how other men looked at Marilyn. He hated the sexy dresses she wore. He hated the flashing cameras and all the public attention. He loved Norma Jean, but he couldn't accept Marilyn. One day, while she was filming the movie The 7-Year Itch, they filmed a scene on a New York street. Marilyn stood over a subway grate, and as a train passed underneath a blast of air, blew her white dress up high in the air. It is now one of the most famous images in the world. Thousands of men who were watching cheered and clapped. But Joe DiMaggio, who was standing nearby, was furious. He was embarrassed and angry. That night they had a terrible fight. He hit her. She cried. He apologized. But the damage was done. Just 9 months after their wedding, Marilyn filed for divorce. She told the court that the marriage was full of emotional cruelty. Joe loved her, yes, but he could not accept who she was. Marilyn wanted to shine in the light. He wanted her to hide in the shadows. Marilyn was also getting tired of being called a dumb blonde. People loved her body, her smile, her soft voice, but they didn't see her mind. They didn't see her dreams or her pain. She once said, "People had a habit of looking at me as if I were some kind of mirror. They didn't see me. They only saw their own ideas of me." So she started to fight back in her own quiet way. She began reading serious books, books about psychology, poetry, and philosophy. She started writing in journals every single day, filling them with her deep thoughts, her fears, and her dreams. She began working with a famous acting coach in New York named Lee Strasberg. She joined the Actors Studio, a place where very serious actors trained to become better at their craft. She wanted to be respected, not just loved. In 1956, she married for a third time. This time, she married Arthur Miller, a brilliant and famous playwright. He was the author of the play Death of a Salesman. Marilyn hoped this marriage would be different. Arthur was smart. He was kind, and he seemed calm. She thought he saw her as more than just a sex symbol. They moved away from Hollywood to New York. She tried to become a more serious actress, and in 1956 she starred in a film called Bus Stop. For that role, the critics praised her performance. They finally saw her talent. She also started her own production company, which she called Marilyn Monroe Productions. This was a very bold move for a woman in a world that was completely controlled by men. But her marriage with Arthur Miller also began to fall apart slowly and painfully. One day, she found his private diary and read it. In it, he had written something that broke her heart. He wrote, "I married her, but I am disappointed." Those words were like a knife in her heart. She never truly recovered from them. As the years passed, Marilyn became more and more fragile. She had terrible insomnia. She could not sleep without taking pills. She started having panic attacks before filming her scenes. She was often late to the movie set because she was scared and exhausted. She also suffered several miscarriages. She wanted a baby so badly. She dreamed of being a mother. But her body, for some reason, could not carry a baby. Each miscarriage left her more broken inside. She started taking more pills, pills for sleep, pills for her nerves, pills for the pain. She started drinking more alcohol. She was often late to the film sets. She would forget her lines. The directors became angry with her. The studios started to lose their faith in her. She was quietly, slowly drowning. During this difficult time, Marilyn was rumored to have affairs with many powerful men. The most famous rumor was about an affair with the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. She sang, "Happy Birthday, Mr. President" to him in 1962, wearing a skin-tight, sparkling dress in front of thousands of people. The world was shocked. The rumors exploded. Was she his lover? Was it true? She never confirmed it, but the way she looked at him, the smile she gave him that night, it told the world that something had happened between them. Later, people whispered that she also had an affair with JFK's brother, Robert Kennedy. Some people say she knew too many secrets. Some people say she was silenced because of it. But what we do know for sure is this: behind all the fame and the glamour, Marilyn was deeply, terribly alone. In her last interviews, she often said sad things like, "Fame doesn't fulfill you. It warms you a bit, but that warmth is temporary." In 1962, Marilyn Monroe was still a global superstar. She was rich, she was famous, but she was also deeply broken on the inside. She was only 36 years old, which is so young by today's standards. But she had already lived through a lifetime of pain. Behind the camera flashes, the red carpets, and the diamonds, she was falling apart. That year, she was cast in a new film. It was called Something's Got to Give. It was supposed to be her big comeback, a new, fresh chapter in her career. The studio 20th Century Fox had very high hopes. But Marilyn was not well. She would often come to the set very late, or sometimes not at all. Sometimes she would arrive, stand there quietly, and then just disappear without filming anything. She had no energy, she had no sleep, and she had no peace in her heart. She was dealing with pneumonia, a sinus infection, and a deep emotional exhaustion that never went away. But the media, the newspapers, they didn't care about her pain. They just said she was difficult, unprofessional, or lazy. She wasn't lazy. She was hurting. Still, on the days when she did show up, she could create magic. She filmed a now-famous scene in a swimming pool, wearing nothing at all, smiling at the camera like a goddess. It became one of her most iconic moments, even though the film was never finished. In May of 1962, after too many delays and missed days, the studio did something shocking. They fired Marilyn Monroe. They fired the most famous woman in the world. The media laughed. People said, "She's finished." Others said she was crazy addicted and unreliable. But then, just a few weeks later, the studio changed its mind. They realized that no one could replace her. The fans still loved her, so they begged her to come back. They even gave her a raise, more money than before. In a way, she had won. But she wasn't celebrating. Inside, she just felt exhausted, confused and trapped between two different worlds: the world of Marilyn, the fantasy, and the world of Norma Jean, the broken girl. That summer, Marilyn's life felt like it was spinning out of control. She had fired her longtime publicist. She changed her therapists. She was cutting people out of her life one by one, even some of the people who truly cared about her. She was mixing sleeping pills, anti-anxiety drugs, and alcohol. This was a very dangerous combination. But she couldn't stop. She couldn't sleep. She cried alone for hours. She wrote sad things in her notebooks, thoughts about feeling worthless, about emptiness, and about death. She had started speaking again to her ex-husband, Joe DiMaggio. He still loved her even after all those years. He wanted to protect her. He had even made a plan to remarry her, to save her from Hollywood. He was the only man who ever came back for her. But Marilyn was slipping away too fast. Her last day, a Saturday, seemed quiet. She spoke with several people on the phone, her psychiatrist, her maid, some friends. People who spoke to her said she seemed okay, maybe even a little cheerful. But then night came. Her housekeeper, a woman named Eunice Murray, said that Marilyn went into her bedroom at around 8:00 p.m. and closed the door. She didn't come out. At 3:30 in the morning, Eunice became worried. The light was still on under the door, but the door was locked. There was no sound from inside. She called Marilyn's psychiatrist, a doctor named Ralph Greenson. They broke a window to get inside the room. Marilyn Monroe was lying on her bed, naked, face down, holding a telephone in her hand. Beside her bed were empty pill bottles. Too many of them. She was already cold. The most famous woman in the world was gone. The official cause of death was listed as a probable suicide from a barbiturate overdose. She had taken too many sleeping pills. The report said there were no signs of violence and there was no suicide note. But to this day, many people believe it wasn't that simple. Some say it was an accident, that she didn't want to die, she just desperately wanted to sleep. Others believe it was murder. Here are the most powerful theories that still exist today. 1. The Kennedy connection. People believe she knew too many political secrets. They say she was calling the White House too often, and some believe government agents silenced her to protect the president. 2. The Mafia theory. She had connections to powerful men in the criminal underworld. Maybe she was used by them and then became too dangerous. 3. The psychiatrist's involvement. Some people think her doctor gave her too many pills, that he was trying to control her, and that it went too far. But the truth is, no one really knows what happened in that room. What we do know is this: she died alone with the telephone in her hand. Maybe she was calling for help, or maybe she was trying to say goodbye. After her death, it was Joe DiMaggio who took care of everything. He arranged her funeral. He did not let any of the powerful Hollywood people attend. No actors, no studio bosses, no fakes. Just her real family and a few close friends. And for the next 20 years, Joe sent fresh red roses to her grave 3 times a week every week. He never married again. He never forgot her. In the end, the man who couldn't handle her fame was the only one who stayed loyal until the very end. After she died, people found her personal journals and her private notes. On one page, she had written, "Please don't make me a joke. I want to be a great artist, not a circus act." On another, she wrote, "I just want to be wonderful." And in one of her letters, she wrote, "To all the people who have ever loved me, I hope I was good to you." She was not just a pretty face. She was a woman full of hope, deep thought poetry, and so much pain. Marilyn Monroe was buried on August 8, 1962, in a quiet crypt at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles. She wore a green dress by Emilio Pucci, chosen for her by her ex-husband, Joe DiMaggio. Her makeup and hair were done by her personal stylist one last time. The press stood outside the cemetery gates. Fans cried in silence. And inside the small chapel, Joe stood near her coffin. Tears in his eyes, he whispered only 3 words, "I love you." When the news of Marilyn Monroe's death spread, the entire world seemed to stop. In Paris, people lit candles for her. In Japan, fans gathered in theaters to watch her old films. In New York and Los Angeles, crowds stood outside her home and wept. The President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, did not make a public comment. His silence only made the rumors grow louder. Every newspaper in the world had her photo on the front page. Marilyn Monroe, dead at 36. But no headline could truly capture the heartbreak. The woman who brought so many smiles to millions of people had died alone with sadness in her heart. Years after her death, people discovered something shocking. The FBI, the American Secret Police, had a secret file on Marilyn Monroe. They had been watching her, recording her phone calls, and tracking her relationships, especially her relationships with John F. Kennedy and his brother, Robert Kennedy. Why? Because Marilyn had started attending meetings with left-wing thinkers, poets, artists, and even some people who were accused of having communist connections. The U.S. government during the Cold War was terrified of a woman who had deep access to the White House, who struggled with her mental health, and who knew private secrets. They saw her as a potential danger. Some people believe these secret files are the missing key to her death. But even today, most of those files are still sealed, locked away, hidden, and silent. Years after her death, Marilyn's personal items were stored away, hidden for a long time, and then later auctioned for millions of dollars. Here are just a few examples. Her famous white dress from the 7-Year Itch sold for $4.6 million. It is the most expensive movie dress in history. Her handwritten diaries, poems, and letters were bought by private collectors. Her lipsticks, her shoes, her perfume bottles are now displayed in museums. Even the empty prescription pill bottles from her nightstand were sold. People wanted to own a piece of her. Even in death, Marilyn became a business. Her face was printed on T-shirts, posters, makeup, and perfumes. Some people found it beautiful, a tribute. Others said it was exploitation, the very same thing that broke her when she was alive. After her death, several of the men who had once pushed her away came forward with words of regret. Arthur Miller. Her third husband said in an interview, "I misunderstood her pain. I wish I had done more. She didn't want fame. She wanted to matter." Even Robert Kennedy, in a private conversation, reportedly said, "I think we failed her. I failed her." Many people thought Marilyn was just a beauty queen, a simple, dumb blonde. But in her own journals, she wrote things that shocked the world. Quotes like, "I'm afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of being forgotten." And, "Fame is like caviar. You get tired of it. I want to grow. I want to learn. I want to be real." She read books by Freud, Tolstoy, and Dostoevsky. She wrote letters to herself that were filled with sadness and longing. One letter said, "What if I wake up tomorrow and no one loves me? What if all this beauty is just a mask?" She was not a doll. She was a poet, a deep thinker, a sensitive woman trapped in a golden cage. Marilyn Monroe became a symbol not just of beauty, but of how women often suffer in silence. She inspired generations of actresses who saw her as the original rebel. She inspired writers who used her life as a metaphor for the pain that can hide behind glamour. She inspired feminists who studied how Hollywood controlled her image. And she inspired young girls who learned that outer beauty can never fix inner wounds. Her life started a global conversation about mental health, body image, misogyny in the film industry, the cost of fame, and how society treats vulnerable women. Even today, her story helps women find their voice. Decades after her death, Marilyn Monroe is still everywhere. In fashion designers like Versace, Dior, and Chanel still recreate her looks. In music stars like Madonna, Beyoncé, Nicki Minaj, and Lady Gaga have all paid tribute to her. In films from My Week with Marilyn in 2011 to documentaries in 2022 and 2023, in tattoos, paintings, museums, and even in AI. AI-generated voices and digital art. Marilyn has become more than a person. She's a symbol of longing, mystery, beauty, and sadness. Everyone talks about her body, her smile, her films. But do you know what Marilyn truly wanted? She once said, "I don't want to be rich. I want to be loved, truly loved. I want a baby. I want to sing lullabies. I want peace." She dreamed of a quiet home, a baby's cry, a hand to hold in the middle of the night. She didn't want the diamonds. She didn't want the crowds. She just wanted to feel safe. In one of her final notes, she wrote, "I hope people don't just remember my body. I hope they remember my heart." And the world answered her. We didn't forget. We still talk about her. We still cry for her. We still wish someone had been there to save her. Marilyn Monroe died at just 36 years old. But in those 36 years, she lived a life that millions of people still talk about today. And why? Because her story was not just about a movie star. It was the story of a girl who felt unloved, who fought through pain, who smiled even when she was crying inside, and who never gave up even when the world felt too heavy to carry. She left this world a long time ago, but her life still speaks to us. Her story still whispers in the ears of people who feel alone, unseen, or not good enough. The world remembers her face, her lips, her blonde hair, her voice. But her real legacy is much bigger than her looks. She taught us that even the most beautiful people can feel deep sadness. She taught us that fame and money do not guarantee happiness. And she taught us that childhood trauma leaves marks that fame cannot erase. The world will praise you when you shine, and it might leave you when you fall. She showed us how a person can keep going, even when they feel broken inside. In the 1950s, women were told to be quiet, to stay at home, to just smile and obey. But Marilyn didn't follow those rules. She built her own company, Marilyn Monroe Productions, at a time when studios controlled everything. She demanded better roles, not just the sexy ones. She fought for higher pay equal to what the male actors were getting. She studied acting deeply because she didn't just want to be pretty. She wanted to be respected. She made mistakes. She cried. She fell apart sometimes, but she never stopped trying. She walked into rooms where no woman had ever had power, and she made them look at her differently. She became a symbol of courage. She gave a voice to the silenced. In her time, people didn't talk openly about depression, sexual abuse, mental illness, loneliness, miscarriage, or self-worth. But Marilyn lived through all of it, and she still stood up, smiled at the world, and said, "I'm not perfect, but I'm real." She didn't hide her pain. She didn't pretend to be strong all the time. And in doing that, she made millions of other people feel seen. Even today, people who are suffering in silence look at her story and think, if she could go through all of that, maybe I can survive too. She gave strength to people who were too afraid to speak. She didn't have a rich father. She didn't go to the best schools. She didn't have a big support system. She was told she was nothing, but she became everything. She didn't become successful because she had money or connections. She became successful because she never ever stopped dreaming, even when the world told her to give up. That's why her story matters. That's why it touches people in every country, in every language. Here are 5 powerful life lessons we can learn from the story of Marilyn Monroe. 1. You do not need a perfect past to create a powerful future. Marilyn came from abuse from orphanages and from deep sadness, but she did not let her past define her future. She used her pain and built something beautiful from it. The lesson is your past is not your prison. It can become your power. 2. Fame and money cannot replace love and peace. She had all the beauty, all the wealth, all the fans in the world, but her heart was still searching for something real. The lesson is don't chase the spotlight. Chase peace. Chase truth. Chase the people who stay. Don't be afraid to demand respect, even if they call you difficult. She said no to things she didn't want to do. She asked for better roles. She refused to be treated like an object. And yes, they called her hard to work with. But later, they respected her for it. The lesson is speak up, even if your voice shakes. Your worth is not up for debate. 4. Healing is hard, and it's okay to fall sometimes. She wasn't always strong. She cried. She broke down. She made mistakes, but she kept trying to get better. The lesson is healing is not a straight line. It's messy. But every single time you get back up, you grow stronger. And 5. Your real value is not in your looks, it's in your soul. The world loved Marilyn for her face, but today people love her even more for her depth, her thoughts, her heart, and her truth. The lesson is beauty fades, but your words, your kindness, your courage, that is what people will remember. Many people ask, what if someone had just hugged her that night? What if someone had picked up the phone? What if someone had told her you matter before it was too late? Maybe she would have lived. Maybe she would have become a mother. Maybe she would have written books, or directed films, or taught young actors. But we can't go back. What we can do is learn from her story. We can speak more kindly to those who we know are suffering. We can learn to forgive ourselves for falling. We can stop judging people by what they show on the outside, because even the ones with the biggest smiles might be the ones hiding the deepest pain. Marilyn Monroe did not get the happy ending she deserved. But her story is not just about sadness. It's about survival. It's about courage, about fighting back when everything is trying to break you, and still smiling, still trying, still believing that love is possible. She once said, "Keep smiling because life is a beautiful thing, and there's so much to smile about." So we smile, we cry, and we remember her, not just as a blonde beauty, but as a girl who tried, who fell, who rose, and who still lives in every heart that feels just a little too soft for this hard world. And that was the unforgettable story of Marilyn Monroe, a story of pain, power, beauty, and truth. If you felt something in your heart today, if you want to hear more inspiring stories like this one, and if you want to learn English in the most emotional and powerful way, then please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Every day, we bring you stories that teach you English and also teach you about life. Stories that make you think, feel, and grow. This is not just a channel. This is your place to learn to improve and to feel stronger every day. So please hit that subscribe button and join me again tomorrow for another powerful story, another lesson, and another step toward becoming the best version of yourself. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.